Friends and subscribers, this is China News for August 2015. A lot of news going on here in China. Let's get right into it and go with some of the top stories. The blast in Tianjin that singed 20,000 square meters of the port city is being talked about all around the world still. A lot of speculation onto what exactly happened in the port. The damage is massive. Thousands killed, thousands more injured. The true number of the devastation in human lives has not been released by the Chinese central government. But you can be sure that there's probably a delta there of more than what they will report. They never give you the real numbers on this type of devastation because it is an embarrassment to not only the Chinese central government in Beijing, but also the local government in Tianjin. So you can imagine that heads will probably roll as a result of this, even though blame cannot be given to local officials who had nothing to do with the blast itself. But that is Chinese politics, and that is the culture that is in China. 20,000 square meters singed, like I said, and a lot of speculation as to how it could have happened. My initial response to this after it did occur was that there was maybe some weaponry or some material stored there in the port area that was not stored properly, and perhaps it had detonated. On further examination of evidence that we see in the form of pictures and eyewitness and other types of more scientific thought, it appears that it was not an accident. Now, we can speculate all day long on who or what could have done it, but if you look at some of these comments on a Chinese news site, it might give you a better idea. 197 punished for spreading rumors about stock market and Tianjin blast. This is how it goes in China, where you don't have any freedom of speech here. You basically take what the government force feeds you, and you're not allowed to really comment on anything. 197 people arrested for internet posts that were deemed to be false. 165 online accounts were closed for relevant violations. And when looking at some of these comments on Chinese websites, and of course this English language website for the Chinese press, we see that there's a big divide still in China between the Hans and other people. They don't get along, and a lot of people claim that there is a high amount of racism in the United States and the Western world, and that may be true, but no one ever talks about or considers the depth and breadth of racism in Asia, especially in China, because there are over 50 different ethnicities, and many of them don't get a fair shake in what's going on within their country. So these comments here that you can read clearly show that comments like Han Masters and stuff are always chanted because, again, there isn't an equal divide in China. A lot of the minorities don't have any say. There's a lot of resentment between different clans within China. So China, basically, like I've said before, is very tribal, and there are tribes within the borders of China in each province that want to govern themselves and do things their own way. This is the source of the resentment that you'll see on many websites talking about such incidents. So we'll take a look at what could happen next, but this investigation in Tianjin is not going to boil down to getting any real, I guess, explanation of what happened. You'll have to just kind of deduce on your own as to what is most likely the case about the blast. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Apparently, this never got into the Chinese mindset, as the Chinese authorities have arrested nearly 200 people for alleged online rumor mongering about China's stock market turmoil. regardless if it could be true or not, there is no freedom of speech or freedom of press in China, as you know. And apparently, words are as dangerous as baseball bats because the Chinese central government has outlawed any kind of analysis about their markets, and house arrest is one of the forms that they'll use for crackdown. And 15,000 suspects for cyber crimes are right now being investigated. So you can understand why myself, living in China, why I don't post any of my personal information and you never see me on my videos, because what I'm doing here, just simply speaking my mind, is considered a capital offense. So that is where I'm coming from. Now, stock markets in Shenzhen has worst month in 6 years. The Shenzhen Exchange, even though they had a rally here Monday, has had its worst month in 6 years. This is of no surprise as markets go into turmoil all around the world, especially here in China. Beijing authorities have been talking about lifting some capital controls and lifting some requirements on certain stocks here to instill more confidence into the stockholders, meaning that they would then be able to buy and sell shares more liberally. However, there are some A shares of stocks that they will not allow these government-connected people to liquidate. That is disappointing because, like I said, a market must be a market. You must have buying and selling. It must be a free market if there's going to be any integrity, if there's going to be any safety for the population to invest in it. If you don't have transparency, you don't have unfettered buying and selling of stocks and bonds and things of that nature, there's no sense in really being an investor. China, again, like I said, arrested 200 in stock market crackdown, and this is disturbing as we continue to see that there are really no personal freedoms allotted to Chinese population. An official with the Chinese regulatory body, China Securities Regulatory Commission, has been accused of bribery, fraud, and completing under-the-table deals, but isn't that what they all do? But, China needs a scapegoat. They need a scapegoat for their stock market problems. They need a scapegoat for the Tianjin blast. They need a scapegoat for everything, because you can't point blame at the inner party members because they are perfect. This news story coming out of the Washington Post, which, by the way, is, for those of you that are into this kind of thing, it's one of the big Illuminati newspapers and one of the big mouthpieces for the Fed. So if you want to get Fed news or read between the lines of Fed lies, read the Washington Post, and you'll be able to pull some information from there that you can't get from other sources. U.S. developing sanctions against China over cyber thefts. Now, this has been going on for some time, back and forth, tit for tat. The United States and China have active cyber terrorism programs. They call it something else, but essentially what it is cyber spying and cyber terrorism, black ops stuff. And U.S. is talking tough on China for these Chinese hackers that are causing huge problems and creating a bigger divide between the two world's biggest economies. And this is at a time when we have a lot of tension regarding Chinese currency and the stock markets, and of course the event in Tianjin, and so on and so on. So things are escalating here when we talk about regards to tensions and sanctions for hacks. How would they go about doing it? Well, the U.S. claims that the financial data of more than 22 million current and former government employees and family members has been breached by the Chicoms. And tit for tat, China claiming that, first of all, they don't have an active cyber terrorism program, which they do. I've taken you to one of the locations where they groom and harvest talented cyber professionals at Shanghai's Jiao Tong University. If you look back at some of my videos, you'll see that. So that is one of the places where they have an active program, and this couldn't really be at a worse time because, like I said, there's so much going on in the financial markets throughout the world and the economies of China and United States that to get in a tit for tat regarding cyber terrorism and other things, including Africa, just leads to more escalation of problems between the two nations. And if the brakes aren't put on at some point, or if cooler heads don't prevail, we could see some huge mistakes being made on both sides that the populations of both countries will regret. A couple of cartoons of the month from the Chinese press. First one here is from Global Times. We can see that the G20 is pumping up the world economy beyond its limitations, and the result will be explosions. This is a double meaning cartoon when we take into consideration the explosion in Tianjin port. We can see that from a Chinese perspective, they believe that the Western world and the G20 powers are pushing the economy beyond its limitations and perhaps punishing those economies that won't play ball with the West. Second cartoon has to do with Mid-Autumn Festival, which is wrapping up over here in Asia. And despite the celebration that has been going on every year for thousands of years, the Chinese public is concerned about the economy, in particular the yuan. How far will it drop? We've seen a couple of bold moves here in the yuan devaluation, although in the past few days it has strengthened slightly. But the overall trend will be to devalue the yuan. And what does that mean? Well, it's a race to the bottom for all currencies. I've been saying this for years. And that means that the dollar also is not safe. The bottom. Okay, this photo here is of a two-headed piglet born at a farm in Tianjin. No, it is not to do with any type of radiation from a so-called nuclear blast, but it is just a natural occurrence. Two-headed pig reminds me of the Chi-Coms, two-faced, saying one thing out of one mouth and then saying another out of their other mouth. And you can take that in many ways, but a lot of these central government figures, they have A shares of these stocks of which they are putting restrictions on. It's self-benefit, okay? It is to protect themselves, their families, and their cronies. Amazing but true. China repeals underage sex law, says all child sex is rape. I thought that this was self-evident, but apparently in the Middle Kingdom, that has not been said by the central government until now. We are at the end of August 2015, and finally they are saying that all sex with minors is considered a serious crime. Before this date, that was not the case. Okay, we're talking about backwards here. They're saying sexual relations with a girl under 14, regardless of whether coercion is involved, regardless of whether the perpetrator is aware that the victim is under 14, will be regarded as rape. This should go without saying, and this should have been in the books for law years ago, but it hasn't. Notice how they say with a girl. It doesn't mention boys of underage. And notice that the age is 14, okay? That means any girl or boy over the age of 14 apparently cannot be raped, that they are considered an adult, although they are not allowed to vote and they are not allowed to get a driver's license until they turn 21. This type of backwards thinking and hypocritical thinking is really shocking when we are in the midst of the 21st century and they're only now defining rape. Go figure. Big news in China. Xi Jinping continues to amass power as China's economy tanks. Now, for those of you who do not know who Jiang Zemin is, This gentleman right here is the former leader of China, who is or has been officially retired and still holds a great deal of power in Chinese politics. Now, after Deng Xiaoping, who succeeded Mao Zedong as the leader of China, Jiang Zemin took over. And under his leadership, he amassed a great deal of power by essentially giving favors, giving jobs out to people that were aligned with him, and doing so in such a deep and broad fashion that even today, the Xi Jinping people are trying to clean out all of his people that are loyal to him and him alone. And if you remember back a few years ago, the Chongqing government boss was sacked because in part he was aligned with Jiang Zemin, and Xi Jinping was vying for power in China when Bo Xilai, the Chongqing boss, was gaining more and more popularity. So what has happened is it's taken years, in fact, for Xi Jinping to root out all of the non-loyalists to his movement and to erase a lot of the influence that the previous leaders have held over China. And this has led to a lot of internal bickering and problems with central planning, as you can imagine, when a premier of China is able to exert influences over the years and to offer jobs and bribes and kickbacks to so many people. It would take a while to be able to root out all of the corruption and then install your own people, okay? This is not Xi Jinping, the reformer, doing something that's going to benefit China. It's Xi Jinping, the leader with Asian machismo, trying to insert his people where there are people that are loyal to the former leaders. And that is finally culminated now in having house arrest Jiang Zemin, who is at odds with Xi Jinping and their people. Okay, there's a lot more tension here within the Central Party than what people may know back home in the West. Back a few years ago, there was almost a revolution or a coup in the government with the Jiang Zemin people and the Bo Xilai movement out of Chongqing, and all of their allies nearly were able to exert more influence than Xi Jinping and his people. And it could have been a huge mess, but disaster was averted, and the house cleaning has continued throughout China. We'll see what kind of repercussions this has, as there are a lot of pissed off people that have loyalties to the old regime. Here's something that's interesting. Chocolate demand melts in China as stocks bribes decline. Now, unexpected in this stock market meltdown, and coupled with the Xi Jinping regime cracking down on bribes and payoffs for government leaders and business people abroad, chocolate sales have taken a huge hit. This is a photo here of a chocolate horse that can be ordered and given to dinner parties or given as gifts to business people in China. Quite often the designer chocolatiers do well, and in fact $200 million was the value of Golden Monkey chocolates at the highest point of last year that it's ever had. However, it's fallen to less than half that currently because of cut downs on bribery and cut downs on stock market returns. So the Xi Jinping regime and their policies, coupled with the economy, have these strange effects on the economy that we would never consider, in the form of chocolatiers losing money and going out of business, in the form of special liquor sales and companies that sell champagne and things, jewelry stores, even over-the-counter gold sales, which we don't have the numbers on as of yet for this past quarter, but when we get them in, I would expect that they would be down slightly because people are concerned about the economy. And since it's frowned upon now to bribe government officials and business people with expensive gifts, that's going to hurt their economy even worse. So more backwards thinking in China, trying to buck the trend of their cultural norms, which is all about briberies and payoffs and favors. That's how things get done. That's how the wheels get greased in China. Yet you have Xi Jinping coming in against the norms and the wishes of the previous regimes, and trying to cut down on that, and then also having a plan but no plan when it comes to the economy. You're going to see that this thing will definitely worsen, and the calls for reform within the Central Party are going to get louder and louder. A little humor to wrap up this edition of China News. You can see in this cartoon by the New York Times, tit for tat. This cartoon shows China's economy boarding on an elevator that is going straight down, with Japan, a global recovery economist, and the Eurozone all on board, perhaps the United States somewhere in the back. I don't see why they wouldn't be, but it's straight down. Going down, you better believe it. Currency wars, trade wars, real wars, you know the picture. And so that is how it looks for August of 2015. This is by no means all of the news, or even touches a little on all the news that's happening in China here. It's just a little snippet, a little look into what's going on. There's a lot more going on here behind the scenes that we neither have the time nor the energy to report on. So expect the unexpected, and as always, continue to hold real assets. And when you find deals, take them down. I expect gold and silver to dip slightly more before a late year rally. We'll push it back up. And again, let's check here late in the year and into next year how things are valued against gold. That's the key. When we value currencies against other currencies, we see that they're all ugly ducklings, okay? They all have something in common. Fiat, okay? They're not fully convertible currencies. But when we value things against the price of physical gold, not the paper manipulated gold, but the physical gold, check the premiums, add those in as well, you'll see that how things are really valued when you value them against hard assets. That's the only way that you can really assess how much something is worth, or how much something should be paid for, is by doing that physical price. So that's China News for August 2015.